Okie dokie, I believe we are all the way live. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I'm your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass, live in a living color here with you on Grande's Graveyard. Welcome back to another edition of the show where tonight we're jumping in our DeLorean time machines and we are traveling back 40 fucking years to the year 1983, the year that was, right, ladies and gentlemen. There was a bunch of 3D horror sequels. There was a Return of the Jedi. There may have just been some awesome independent horror features and all the shit we love in film in between. As tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we dive headfirst into 1983, the year in horror. So I'm super excited tonight to discuss the year in review that is 1983. I've never done a show like this before. I remember way back in the day, Dead Pit, they made this show infamous where they would pick a random year and they would go through, all the horror titles that came out that year, the good, the bad, and the goddamn ugly. And that's a big reason where I was like getting the inspiration for this. So shout out to Dead Pit as always. They're a big inspiration to me. And probably the biggest reason why I do the show is because of that old school Dead Pit radio show. And this was one of my favorite things they ever did. And I was like, you know what? I should fucking do this. So I let you guys vote on it. I picked either a 20-year anniversary in 2003, which came up short. And then, of course, 1983, which got a majority of the votes. So we'll be running through the horror movies that came out in the year of 1983 tonight. So I'm super excited to get into that with you guys. We have a bunch of people in the house already. Slasher Fred is here. As they said in Videodrome, long live the new Flash. Well, that just may be my favorite movie that came out in 1983. We will get there. AJ's Happy Fun Time channel is here. Ah, yes, 1983, 20 years before Grande was born. I am a young buck, not that young of a buck, but definitely, definitely over, 13, probably, 14 or so years before that. How could that be? Because I'm young, Slasher Fred. I'm a young guy. Sean Blue Digital's in the house. Hey, good evening, folks. Little Hitchcock going on here. We've got a sequel to a classic Hitchcock movie and a damn good sequel in that we'll be discussing here tonight. Welcome, Sean Blue Digital. No Friday the 13th movie this year, oddly enough. That's true, but Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D did get a re-release in 1983. So, I mean, that it did play in the theaters in 1983. 83 and 87 are the only 2 years in the 1980s where there was not a freshly new released Friday the 13th movie in the theater. So, yeah, we sure know how to pick them, ladies and gents. Out of 10 fucking years to choose from, we picked one of the two. There's no Friday the 13th movie to talk about here. Mateo is here. Ciao, Grande. Very excited for tonight. I am born in 1983. Two fun facts of that year. Most played song on the radio was Total Eclipse of the Heart, Return of the Jedi, the highest grossing movie. And the highest grossing horror movie may surprise you, but we will get there. Welcome, Mateo. I'm happy to have an 83 baby in the house. I'm also 40 years old now oh wow. So okay, we got two 83 babies in the house. This is some fun shit right now. We got some 83 blood here. Hey, Grande, Brian is in the house. Cooper Glover, 1972. Welcome, my friend. You'll discuss Videodrome? Hell yeah, I'll discuss Videodrome. It may just be my favorite, and it was the thumbnail. So just saying. So here's how I decided to format this. I wasn't sure at first if I was going to go month by month, week by week. I was going to when I was like, you know what? That'll be boring. Why don't we just fucking jump around? And what I did was I did a top 5. And what I'll do is I'll go start off with a biggie. We'll start off at number 5. We'll dive into some, stuff that didn't make the top 5, some good, bad, goddamn ugly. And then we'll go to number 4. And then we'll just do some jumping around the whole night. I figured it'd be a fun night to jump around, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of 1983 year in horror. Not a lot of bad, really not a lot of bad, not a lot of ugly, a lot of fucking quality stuff. And man, I definitely pride myself on saying I've seen a lot of films. There's quite a few from this year that have eluded me. So I've definitely, be asking you guys what you think of some of these movies that have eluded me. But I have seen it my fair share. Don't get me wrong. This isn't going to be a show where it's like, haven't seen it. That would be pointless to watch. But there have been a couple on here where I was like, damn, I haven't seen that one. So there were a couple. But I'm super excited tonight to discuss this. Scarface is also 40 years old today. Say hello to my little friend. Well, happy birthday, Scarface. Happy 40th. Brit's in the house. 3 hearts, 0 regrets. Brit, welcome to the house. All right, everybody, we're going to dive right into this son of a bitch. So cheers, everyone, to a happy, healthy 3-day holiday Memorial Day weekend. I'm super excited for that. Cheers to y'all. Let's get this 1983 show on the road. Yeah, Raising Gents. Yeah, that's right. We got Sleepaway Camp on the t-shirt. And I guess, you know what? Why the hell not start it off with my number 5 favorite horror movie of the year 1983. There's a lot to choose from. A lot of great ones, but this one may just be on my shirt right now. Yes, from, of course, 1983. This is Robert Hiltzich's film, This is Sleepaway Camp. Angela Baker, a shy, traumatized young girl, is sent to summer camp with her cousin Ricky. Shortly after her arrival, anyone with sinister or less than honorable intentions toward her get their comeuppance. Yes, Sleepaway Camp. You won't be coming home. This is a movie that I've felt a million and one different ways about. Like, if there's one movie that I've changed on the most in my life, it's the original Sleepaway Camp movie. I will never forget watching it back in the day. This is back when I would seek out horror movies on YouTube, right? I mean, like if they weren't in the rental store, I would go on YouTube and watch horror movies. People would upload them in parts. It would be parts 1 of 9, and you could just sit there and fucking, watch horror movies, 10-minute intervals, and watch horror movies. It was before ads, before the advertisement, and watch a movie free with ads. No, I would go on YouTube, watch them in fucking 240p quality. It looked like it was shot with a fucking baked potato. And that's how I started getting into horror movies, horror movies that I couldn't access, I guess. And Sleepaway Camp, I always remember being one of the ones where I found around middle school time. And I remember the first time I saw it, it blew me away. I was absolutely blown away by the movie. And then as the years have gone on, kind of lesser and lesser, but it still does make the top 5. And it's kind of weird because it's one of the more bittersweet movies for me in the history of movies. And a lot of that becomes from a bias from me because I love these movies. I love the sequels better. I love Pamela Springsteen and the song and what's your favorite color? Blood red. All the fucking nooks and crannies that go along with those sequels. But that doesn't mean that the original movie isn't special in and of itself. And I do think the original movie is special in and of itself. I've just really been iffy my whole life on whether I love or hate the movie, whatever that is. I mean, I don't know. It's weird because I have it in the top 5, but there are aspects of this movie that I do think are overrated. And I do think there are other slasher movies that are from around this era that maybe deserve a little bit more of that, shine, a little bit more of that, notoriety. And I do think Sleepaway, like getting into positives, I love the atmosphere. I love the camp setting. I love some of the kills. Of course, the beehive kill in the bathroom. I always thought that was a brilliant kill. The arrow to the neck, the girl in the shower. I always thought that was brutally done. The curling iron to the pussy. I mean, there's some great kills in this movie. Of course, there's the fun 80s over the top lines. The name's Meg. M-E-G. I mean, we gotta love Meg, and of course the Judy character. Have you seen Judy? Oh man, the perverted cook. There's a lot of 1980s like goodness cheese in this movie, without a doubt. But I always felt that the reason that this movie is so memorable and the reason that it is still talked about 40 years later is because of this iconic final shot. Is because of the twist at the end. It's one of the more unmemorable. I mean, it's one of the most memorable fucking endings ever in film history, and you never see it coming. I mean, you never anticipate where that movie's going, and once it happens, of course, with the Felissa Rose character, and she's a boy. That classic iconic shot of the look to the side and the green phase over, and that's the song. It's just what I've been looking for. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Iconic, memorable, very memorable. And even though at the time it wasn't a box office smash like they were probably hoping, this is one of the last movies that was really trying to capitalize on that camp success, right? Like what Friday the 13th would do in 1980. This is one of those movies that was trying to start that money train again. And unfortunately, it really did stop. It wasn't that big of a hit. The writer-director ended up selling the rights 5 years later to Double Helix Films. And that's when we get these two classic direct-to-video movies with the great Pamela Springsteen. But I don't know. I always, and I guess I can afford to be telling you guys a little bit of an anecdote here. I'll never forget. I've seen this movie in the theater 3 times, 3 fucking times, twice in New York City. And I remember going to fucking New York City to see it. The fucking entire cast was there. The director was there. And it was a great experience. It was a wonderful, this was right around the time where Scream Factory released the Blu-ray in like 2014-ish. I remember going to see it with my dad. We went to go see it in the movie theater. Really cool. But then I remember they did a triple feature. They did Sleepaway Camp 1 through 3 on 35. And I went, and I remember we were standing in line after the second movie had ended, and we were pre-gaming for the third movie, which is my favorite. And this guy in the line really turned me on the first movie. And this is where my bias comes in a little bit here, where he goes, man, he goes, that sequel's awful. I was like, you don't fucking like Sleepaway Camp 2? He goes, man, there's no story to it. It's just killing. And I was like, oh man. He goes, oh, the first one has a great story and this and that. And he put over Felissa Rose. I'm like, God damn it. Like, this is what turns me. This is the bias where I'm like, God damn it, that first movie's a little bit overrated. I just wish that it had the reputation that, these sequels, I wish they had the reputation the original had. I think that's one of the things that always kind of like made me go like, like if you only fucking watch the sequels, because there are two camps of people. There's a camp that preferred to the original Sleepaway Camp, and it is a fun movie. It is a classic 80s slasher movie. It really is. But then there's the camp that do prefer the sequels better. And I like to think of myself as the fucking ringleader of that camp of people. Like, I am the head mark in that fucking semicircle. And like, that is my bread and butter. That is my fucking church. I love the sequels way better than the original movie. But it seems like there's two different classes, two different parties there. So I don't know. Sleepaway Camp to me, though, it has to be in the top 5. When I sat down and really mapped this out, it was like Sleepaway Camp from slasher standpoint would have to make the list. So that's why it comes in at the number 5 slot. But, we're going to talk about plenty of movies tonight. We're going to jump around plenty. I'm super excited tonight. I think the Sleepaway Camp was the first film to include a transgender character. Well, that was the big twist at the end. I know there's a big controversy on it now, where everyone says, it's transphobic or whatever. I don't think so. I really don't see it that way. I mean, people can look at it however they want to look at it. I'm not trying to tell you should look at it one way or another. I never saw it that way. It's a fucking cheesy slasher movie from the 1980s. Like, I don't think it had anything fucking to say. I really don't. But that's just me. Shit. Got me dates mixed up, and apparently Scarface was released overseas on this day. Well, it's the 40th birthday for it somewhere. Big talk in schoolyard about Sleepaway Camp. Yeah, no, I remember going to class after I had seen it on YouTube. This was like, I think around 7th grade. This was right when I started middle school. I remember telling everybody about it. Oh my God, this fucking movie with the fucking beehive and the kids playing the softball and the fucking water balloon fight on the roof, which I remember my friend always made fun of. He was like, who the hell has a water balloon fight on a roof? And I was like, yeah, it's a fucking good question. Like, I don't know. But the 80s, right? It's the fucking 80s, I guess. I don't know. I remember it being like a big conversation in homeroom when I was telling people about this movie. People were like, what? She's really a boy? I was like, yeah, that's the big twist at the end. And people were like, holy shit, some people loved it, some people hated it, but it was something to talk about at the homeroom table, if you will. Just don't tell the homeroom teacher. Hit the like button, guys. Thank you so much. Yes, that was a twist I never saw coming. And that's the thing, I think, why 40 years later it's still remembered. Like people like Madman fell between the cracks. The Burning is remembered for Savini's effects. My Bloody Valentine is remembered. There's slasher movies that are forgotten, or slasher movies that are remembered, and Sleepaway Camp is always remembered, even way more so than the sequels that I do think improved upon it. But the factor of memorability, it would have to be in the top 5 for me. When in a movie there is a flashback montage, you can't go wrong with it. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, and the whole creepy aunt with the giant hands. No, that isn't right at all. I mean, she's great. I love that actress. That actress just passed away a couple years ago, so may she rest in peace. And everybody knows that Grande hates Clockwork Orange, Sleepaway Camp 3, and April Fool's Day. The posters behind him. Of course, I hate these movies. I mean, they're only my bread and butter. You know what's crazy? I've never fucking reviewed April Fool's Day. I'm letting my fans down here. I've got to do, and it's funny, April just passed, so I don't know what the occasion would be, but I definitely got to review April Fool's Day one of these days. But no, Sleepaway Camp, it's a gem. It's an 80s slasher gem. I always liked the movie. It's weird. Like, over the years, my personal bias has kind of turned me against it a little bit because I'm such a mark for these sequels. But I'm not, that's why I put it on a high pedestal here. It's like, I do appreciate the movie. I do understand what the movie did for horror, but it was really more effect years later. It wasn't a big hit at the time. It was one of those movies that, garnered a cult following over the years. And now it's like one of the big 80s slasher movies that always gets mentioned amongst genre fans. So, I mean, that's worth noting, I think. I mean, the original Sleepaway Camp and You Won't Be Going Home. I mean, just really cool, iconic, classic stuff. But let's jump around a little bit now. Let's jump around to the first horror movie that was released in 1983. And it's another slasher movie. Yes, I mean, slasher movies in 1981. That was the year of the slasher, of course. You have a lot of Monkey See, Monkey Do. You have a lot of sequels in this year of 1983, but this one is an original slasher movie that was trying, of course, to bank on the success of a Friday the 13th, Halloween, what have you. This is The House on Sorority Row. Yes, The House on Sorority Row from 1983, which is another movie I've actually had the pleasure of seeing in a theater. Stars Kate McNeil, who would go on to be in, movies like Monkey Shines, and it tells the story of these sorority sisters, in The House on Sorority Row that they play this evil, cruel prank on their bitch of a house mistress that goes horribly wrong, and they end up killing the woman. She drowns in the pool, and one by one, they start getting picked off by this unknown assailant. And I always remember this movie having very like dreamsicle atmosphere, very interesting kills, really like bitchy characters that you kind of wanted to see get their fucking comeuppance, but a good mystery as to who the hell is doing this. Is it one of the girls? Is it an outside party? Is it somebody who has some sort of relation to the headmistress? I always really liked the House in Sorority Row. I think when it comes to like really good, underrated standalone independent slasher movies, that this is one that always kind of stood out to me a little bit. I actually really like the House in Sorority Row. And I think, it's a shame the movie didn't make that much. I mean, it was a limited release in January the 21st of 1983. It didn't get that big of a or wider release, but it's another slasher movie that I think is damn good. See, again, while I don't know if it's as good as the Sleepaway Camp, again, I wish more people knew it. Like it's another House in Sorority Row. It doesn't get mentioned as much as the Sleepaway Camp. So that's, again, it's like, I like Sleepaway Camp. It's good. It's better than this movie. But God damn it, why does it have so much notoriety? Like, I just wish other movies from this era had a little bit more notoriety like it. That's my bias against the movie, I suppose. But I really do like the House in Sorority Row. I think it's good. I think it's well acted, well directed. I know this is one that they wanted to set up for a sequel. They really were trying to make the killer at the end of this like another Freddy, another Jason, another Michael Myers. They were really going for that type of finale where we bring this guy back and do the House in Sorority Row 2, 3, 4, House in Sorority Row in Manhattan. They wanted to make this a big franchise, and the movie unfortunately was not a big hit, and that's why we never got a sequel to it. But I would have been all for a sequel to it. I totally would have. I know the director was all in for it, the writer was all in for it, they were all in for it, but unfortunately the movie just didn't make enough noise at the box office. A January horror release, that's really where people are still licking their wounds. We did the whole January horror show where a lot of these movies are released in January horror wise, and they're pretty much let out there to die. Every now and again you get a big hit in January horror wise, but House in Sorority Row was kind of left out there, and it let out there to die, unfortunately. So it is what it is. I always thought that Aunt was a dude. I know I saw 5 O'Clock Shadow, dude, her hands were fucking huge. Like, what the fuck, man? That lady's hands, oh my God. She could have played fucking ball with fucking Wilt Chamberlain. Why haven't you reviewed April Fool's Day Grande? I am appalled. Just kidding. I've never fucking reviewed it. It's so funny. It shares the screen with me every week, and I've never reviewed the movie. It's bizarre. Mernsy is here. Me and Mernsy were shooting this shit on some Aronofsky before the show went live. Hey, what's up, everybody? 1983, baby. Let's go. Hell yeah, man. We're running through it. One of the horror movies that came out in 83 that I have seen, which is very scary, is Nightmares, which is a horror anthology film, which is one of the segments is with Emilio Estevez. That's right. There was a bunch of horror anthology films this year because, of course, Hollywood being the monkey see, monkey do business. Monkey see creep show, monkey make nightmares. Monkey see creep show, monkey make scream time. Monkey see creep show, monkey make the Twilight Zone movie. So we're going to get into all the 3 horror anthology movies that came out this year. There might have been 4. I'll check the list again. There's a huge fucking list of horror movies. It's crazy. Of course, they did a remake in 2009, Sorority Row, which is a stinker. I agree, Mateo. The Corchester Antagonist is very scary. I always thought it was a good movie. Like, I was, kind of astonished that it didn't become a big hit. Like, to me, it's definitely a fucking good enough movie. Like, it's definitely like above average slasher movie. I don't know. It's funny. Maybe it just didn't strike a nerve. Didn't make the right. Maybe it was the poor timing. I don't know. It's a lot of this stuff. It's timing. The Sleepaway Camp is a bigger hit now than it ever was then. And like you look at fucking House in Sorority Row, wasn't really a big hit then, doesn't really get much mention now. It's flat. To some people, it just didn't catch on. So I mean, it is what it is. Fulci's Conquest 1983. Gotta love some Lucio fucking Fulci. But you know what? Since somebody mentioned anthologies, let's run through 1 or 2, or hell, we can maybe run through all of the anthologies before we get to my number 4 pick. Like I said, Monkey See, Monkey Do Business. Of course, we have Scream Time, Nightmares, and the Twilight Zone movie. I guess we can talk a little bit about Scream Time first. That's a horror movie from 1983 that I bet most people have not seen. Scream Time is a very interesting British anthology movie where they were definitely going on the capitalization of Creepshow. I mean, granted, they had about, I don't know, a fucking 119 fucking of a budget of Creepshow. I mean, it had no budget at all, Scream Time, but I thought it was an interesting setup where it's the opening wraparound story takes place in New York City. And it's these two guys, they rob a video store and they start putting the tapes in, and what they watch is what we watch. Similar to VHS, when VHS came out in 2012. Very similar kind of wraparound story, only a lot better here than it is in that movie. These two guys and this one chick, they're watching these VHS tapes, and the three of them are short British horror films. And I actually really like Scream Time as a whole. I think it's a damn good horror anthology. I remember the first story tells the story of this guy who's like a puppeteer. He's a world famous puppeteer, and he likes to put on these free shows every Sunday on the beach. He puts on this puppet show for the kids, and he's getting older and older. And his family's like, "Hey, man, you're getting up there. Like, you got to call it a day. You've got to retire. Like, you've done your last puppet show, my guy." And he's sad about it. He's depressed about it. And basically, out of all of a sudden, you are led to think that his puppets have come to life and start picking off his family members that discouraged him one by one. And it has a wild twist in it that you could probably see coming. But I always thought that was a great horror anthology segment of this disgruntled and discouraged, puppeteer that only wanted to just do was entertain people. And one day his family tells him, no, you can't do that. It's the horrors of hanging it up, the horrors of having to retire. I always thought that was a really good one. There's the haunted house segment in Scream Time that I thought was the best of the three. I always thought that was a great fucking anthology segment of, this couple, they move into a new house and she keeps seeing these weird kind of visions. And, slowly but surely they're putting the pieces together as to why she's seeing these visions. Really good scare sequences, I remember. And I thought it was like very scary. Scream Time has some really good scare sequences in it, especially that middle segment, the haunted house. And then the last segment I always thought was the weakest, where it was like these two or three friends, they could take this job with these two old ladies to work in their garden, like to keep their house safe from burglary. And the old ladies are rich and stuff, and basically they say our garden is protected by these gnomes and these fairies, and they protect our fucking stuff. Don't get any ideas. You're here to protect our stuff too. And of course, the guy's like in one ear, out the other, and they decide to rob the old broads. And one by one, they get attacked by these fucking fairies, which I always thought was the weakest segment of the movie. But I don't know. I liked Scream Time. I thought Scream Time was a really good one. And then, of course, the wraparound where all of the things they watched in the movie come out of the television, the Ring style, like Sadako Yamamura come out of the TV. The puppeteer comes out of the TV. The fucking, creatures in the fucking garden and the haunted house, like everything comes out of the television at the end and attacks the people that were watching it. I always thought it was a really good anthology. It's a movie that desperately needed more money and a wider distribution, and I think it could have been a big hit. Again, it's another case in point of it didn't really get a wide release. But a movie that did get a wide release, that was a anthology horror movie from this year, was the movie Nightmares, which Slasher Fred just mentioned, which got over 1,000 theaters released, which is wild. The movie, of course, bombed. It didn't make any money. Joseph Sargent would be the director of it. He made a ton of fucking movies. I don't know. Nightmares is one of those movies that should be way better than it is, because only one of the stories really is memorable. And funny enough, Slasher Fred, that's the one he remembered, was the Emilio Estevez one, where Emilio Estevez is like this big, like, video game player. He's a fucking hustler, and he pretends to be bad at video games, and then they fucking hustle these kids out of their money. But there's this one big video game in an arcade that he can't beat. He can't get to the 13th level, and the game kicks his ass, and he goes home all fucking mad, and he decides to run out of his house at the end of night, and he goes up to the fucking arcade and basically beats the level and is transferred into this world of the dark level 13, and he's becomes a part of the game. And I always thought it was a brilliant segment in horror. Like, I love the fucking game segment in Nightmares. Like, really good stuff to me. Like, the rest of the stuff in that movie, though, just not as memorable. There's a segment with Veronica Cartwright. There's fucking man, I just never cared for a lot of the other segments in Nightmares. I always thought the rest of it was like, you had that one big great segment, but then the other three kind of very forgettable, I guess. And the movie didn't make much money. I mean, it is what it is. But the big one horror anthology wise would have to be the Twilight Zone movie, which doesn't crack the top 5, but it's one that we're going to have to spend some time on, because this is a crazy movie when you look at this from top to bottom. I mean, this is an absolutely wild film when you're looking at this, because obviously you can't talk about this movie without the Vic Morrow controversy and death, right? Of course, Vic Morrow and these two, I believe, Vietnamese little girls were killed on the set of this film for real. Vic Morrow and one of the girls were decapitated. The other girl was crushed. And they were filming, of course, the segment for John Landis. John Landis was one of the directors. Steven Spielberg had the idea, let's bring the Twilight Zone back. Creepshow just did so well in the theater. Let's do a Twilight Zone movie. And he got, of course, George Miller from Mad Max. And, of course, Joe Dante, pre-Gremlins. This is around the time where he had done The Haunting. He had done Piranha. Of course, this was really Joe Dante's last big stepping stone until he did Gremlins and became Joe Dante. We all know and love it today. And, of course, Spielberg was going to direct one. And then they wanted John Landis. John Landis had done the Blues Brothers. He stuck Steven Spielberg in a small cameo. John Landis had done An American Werewolf in London, which is the greatest werewolf film of all time. There's no debate in my mind. Those four guys, you don't think anything could go wrong. But unfortunately, of course, with the Landis segment, it did. And that's the thing that everybody remembers about. Yeah, I did mean The Howling. I'm sorry. I did mean The Howling. So if I can close it off, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the catch, Slasher Fred. You have four great directors, but you never expect what happened to happen. And what's so insanely bittersweet is that once that happened, Spielberg completely changed his mind on wanting to do it. He didn't want to do it. He was contractually obligated to do it now. And that's really why, if you watch this back, Spielberg's segment's horrible. I mean, it's terrible. The kick the can segment is awful. I think it's the worst segment in the whole movie. And it's just really one of those like, shit, like this fucking sucks, man. Like this, Spielberg's heart wasn't in it. You could tell. He was contractually obligated to do this because he was the main producer. He signed on to direct, and it was just like, okay, go out there. And that's why his is so sweet and sappy and just overly sentimental to the point where it's like, ugh, like it's just too sugary. It's just no good. It'll rot your fucking teeth out of your mouth. That segment's rough, but dare I say, and that's what makes it bittersweet. I think the best two segments in this movie are the Landis segments. I love the fucking segment with Vic Morrow. May he rest in peace. I love that segment where he's playing the racist character and he's, going off because somebody else got a promotion over him and he's crying about race and all this stuff. And then he goes through the shoes of every race that he buried. He buries a black man, and then he wakes up a black man, and he's in the Ku Klux Klan, and they're torturing him. He Vietnamese. He goes. He's on the Holocaust train at the end. They go through every single race that he bashed, and he has to kind of live a few minutes in their shoes. I thought that was a great idea. It was the only one of the four main segments that was not a remake of an old Twilight Zone episode. Of course, Kick the Can was a remake. The, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet was a remake. The fucking It's a Good Life was a remake. And while I like It's a Good Life and I like the 20,000 Feet remake, I think they're good. John Lithgow does a great job. And I really like the Joe Dante segment with It's a Good Life. Again, neither one of those is as good as the original, but still good stuff. To me, the best two segments are the Landis segment. And to me, the best thing in the Twilight Zone movie is the opening 5 minutes of fucking Aykroyd and Albert Brooks driving down the road. Let the midnight special burn, shine a light on me. Great. And they're playing the fucking, guess that theme song? Ba 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 ba. What is it? I don't know, but it's great. You're doing it great. Ba 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 da 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 da. Those two were just fantastic in the car together. And I only speculate that, if Belushi had been alive at this point, it probably would have been Belushi and Aykroyd in the opening scene, which would have been really funny to see. But I mean, it's always good to see Belushi and Albert Brooks. I always really like from news broadcast. What the fuck was? I think it was called News Broadcast or Broadcast News. Broadcast News is what it's called. That's a great movie. William Hurt. I love the opening where then they go back and forth talking theme songs. And hey, you remember that Twilight Zone with the really annoying guy and the stopwatch? No, that was an Outer Limits. That was a zone. That was an Outer Limits. And hey, you want to see something really scary? All right, pull over the car. And it fucking turns into this monster. And I remember when I first saw that, I fucking got freaked out because you never expect that coming with, Dan Aykroyd, who's mainly a comedic actor. And then, of course, Albert Brooks. I don't know. I just never expected that. I expected them to be like, oh, you remember this one? And then transition into story. I thought, wow, what a really good opening, right? I mean, you had some laughs in there. You had a great Creedence Clearwater Revival song, one of my top 10 favorite bands of all time, opening up the movie. And we get the classic Twilight Zone score. I like the movie. It's just one of those movies that you can't talk about it without mentioning the tragedy and the fact that Spielberg's heart wasn't in it. And it was really Spielberg's baby. It was almost like the baby that Spielberg just gave away at adoption or something. Like, he didn't want anything to fucking do with it. I believe to this day, 40 fucking years later, I don't believe he ever forgave John Landis. I don't believe he ever spoke to John Landis again. And I think it's amazing John Landis didn't go to jail. I really do. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it was a money thing. I don't know if it was a power thing. I don't know how he avoided going to jail. I believe they did a few documentaries like discussing the whole trial. I don't know how however he got out of that, he owes the rest of his career to that lawyer, because there are probably people out there tell you he never should have directed again, which I don't agree with. I do think accidents happen, but from a legality standpoint, he broke some fucking rules. Number one, you had fucking little kids on set and they were shooting at like 3 or 4 in the morning. That's fucking illegal right there. That's prison right there, even without Vic Morrow involved. Those kids shouldn't be on the fucking set, let alone you killed them. And I believe the parents got I think they got like a $12 million settlement or something like that. Like, crazy. But it's like, yeah, their fucking kids are dead. They fucking got decapitated. Like, I don't know. It's a very weird movie because I like the movie. And the best parts of it are from the guy that caused the tragedy. So it's like the most bittersweet movie on this whole list for me. And I don't know. It's just that's why it's hard for me to put it on a top 10 or top 5. It would be a top 10. It wouldn't be top 5 though for me. But let me get back to the comments here. I'm sorry. I've neglected y'all for far too long. I get on rants here. I think that the movie Jaws 3 is like Jaws meets Friday the 13th because it involves a mother shark seeking revenge for the death of her child. Yes. And we'll get into Jaws 3 and all its 3D glory. Stuff coming out of the TV, sort of going in and out of TV and Videodrome. Yeah, definitely. Of course, a little makeout session and out of the TV and Videodrome. Mausoleum was also released on this day. We'll be discussing Mausoleum. Not in too much. I've only seen the movie once, so we'll go too in depth on that one. Want to see something really scary? Dude, that whole sequence is the best thing in the movie. Like, it's so fucking good and unexpected. Twilight Zone movie maybe was kind of meh. Spielberg's contribution might have been between one of his worst with Kick the Can. I would agree. I would say it's that and the Jurassic Park sequel, Lost World. I think those are the 2 worst things Spielberg ever did. And it's a shame because, like, I love the first Jurassic Park and I love the Twilight Zone. Like, I wish he had picked a different episode. Kick the Can was always like one that I was like, like, I don't know, maybe if I was older. I don't know. I just never related to the Kick the Can. Alpha Romero, a new subscriber, is here. Welcome, my friend. Alpha Romero does all things George Romero related, which is super cool. You can check out his channel. He did a top 10 Romero villains, which I'm about halfway through. Really enjoying that stuff. So Alpha Romero, shout out to you, my friend. Landis refuses to sign anything for the Twilight Zone to this day. I can't blame him. Well, hey, man, I couldn't either. Like, I would never. I don't know what that guilt would do to me. Like, in retrospect, it would ruin probably my life. Like, if I knew that I was responsible and I was in charge when 3 people lost their lives, that's like fucking, I don't think I would rebound. I really don't. Like, I think I would be in fucking therapy for the rest of my life. Like, I don't understand how he didn't do time. I really don't. Just from a legal standpoint, it's amazing he got out of that. I think Spielberg distanced himself from Landis because of Vic Morrow incident. Definitely he did. Spielberg, 40 years later, they've never talked again. That was it. Their friendship ended there. The kids were brother and sister, I believe. That's right. I love the Twilight Zone regardless of the hate it gets. Hey, no, I like the movie too. I'm completely with you. I like the movie. It's just, you can't really talk about it without talking about that. Landis went to the trials. I guess he wasn't found liable or guilty, but it wasn't one of the shining moments. Well, that is true for sure. I love Landis as a director. Don't know how many times I watched the Blues Brothers, but as a person, after he handled the Morrow incident, I have zero respect. See, I kind of agree with that too. Like, his films, I mean, Animal House is one of the best comedy. It's the college comedy of all time. Like, Belushi is just money in that. I'm a zit. Get it? I mean, Tim Matheson and oh Lord, they'll never know. Yeah. For Animal House, Blues, we're on a mission from God. Landis is the man. So many great comedies, so many great films overall. But Yeah, as a person, I don't know. I want to like him, and I would if it wasn't for that. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't know. But then again, I don't know how I would handle it either. Like I can't sit here and say I would handle it this way. I don't know if I fucking that happened and I was responsible. I would cry my eyes out. I don't know what the fuck I'd do. That's just like one of those that you fucking wake up in the middle of the night, like you fucking you're not expecting that. Like that would suck, man. Kick the can segment is bad, but the other stories are so good. I would agree. I think, yeah, other than the kick the can, they're all fucking pretty good. Yeah, the Morrow story is good, but it's terrible what happened. Exactly. I think that's the best, like, feature segment. That's the best segment. But the lead actor lost his life. Two kids were decapitated. Like, holy fucking shit. Like, it's just hard to separate the art from the fucking what the fuck happened, I guess, is my best way of saying it. His character was supposed to rescue the two Vietnamese kids and learn that just because someone is different than you does not make them your enemy. Yeah, no, that's right. And in turn, they all three of them die. I mean, it's sick. Landis is probably the best. I remember that's like liking the art but hating the artist, like Polanski, Woody Allen, hell, even Victor Salva with the Jeepers Creepers movies. Like, and hell, I would even say always liked Kevin Spacey as an actor. Always liked Kevin Spacey. What he did is fucking like unforgivable. I mean, the guy's a piece of shit, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't a fan of his work. Like before that, I would be lying. The guy is a really good actor. My favorite thing from Landis is the Thriller video, which was 82, which was right around this time. The opening song, Midnight Special, was performed by Creedence Clearwater Revival, and also one of his songs, Bad Moon Rising, was, of course, and I love Creedence. I mean, one of my favorite bands. Landis, it is his best, for Twilight Zone movie. I'd have to see all of Blues Brothers, and I have to rewatch American War of London. I can't remember that awfully well. Wow, you need to definitely watch that. You're definitely missing out. Landis made cameos in two of these movies. Basically hated Animal House, promotes immature behavior. Really? Didn't like Animal House. That's weird. That 1941 fucking sucks. That's true. I think that Animal House was the inspiration for American Pie. Animal House was the inspiration for so many fucking movies. That's like Vince Neil, who committed manslaughter by drunk drive. Yeah, no, fuck, man. Vince Neil, Monty Crew, Animal House. I don't like dude. Wow, that's shock. I love Animal House. It's one of my favorite. That's a top 10 comedy, easy. The series Third Rock from the Sun also did a Twilight Zone reference movie in the series where Dick meets the giant head, where both talk about seeing a creature on the wing. Yeah, there's something on the wing, which he never says in the episode. Animal House is classic. I love Animal House. But yeah, Twilight Zone, the movie, the most bittersweet movie on here, for sure. Doesn't get any more bittersweet than that. It's a real, like, fuck, like, it's an eye opener, man, because of all the controversy. But not as much as Rhinestone, of course. No, AJ's favorite movie is Rhinestone with Stallone and Dolly. There's no fucking doubt about that. But let's go to February of 1983. We're jumping all around. Then we'll get into my number 4 on the top 5 list. A lesser talked about one. This was with Barbara Hershey. This is The Entity from 1983, February of 1983 to be exact. Always really liked this movie. I never thought much of Barbara Hershey as an actress until I saw this movie. I always remember her in Hoosiers with fucking Gene Hackman. That's one of my favorite sports movies. The fucking score. She plays the love interest in that. I always thought she was just kind of meh as an actress, but man, The Entity, if you want to see her at her top or get fucking game, watch The Entity. It's a fucking good horror movie. It has a lot of dramatic elements in there, but her performance alone I thought was fantastic. It runs a little long. I believe it was around 2 hours. I could double check here. Yes, it was over 2 hours. So it's a little bit long in the tooth, but The Entity is a damn good one from 1983 that nobody really mentions. One that I would be due for a rewatch. I don't know if there's a special edition blue out of The Entity, but it's one I definitely would like to revisit down the road because that's one I really remember liking. Stephen King was a big year for 83 because you not only had Cujo, you also had Christine and The Dead Zone. Well, those movies might just be on my top 5 list, just saying. And I guess you know what? That's a perfect transition, Slasher Fred, to my number 4 on my top 5 list, of course, of 1983. This is The Dead Zone. A man awakens from a coma to discover he has a psychic ability. Yes, Stephen King, Jeffrey Boehm, a little David Cronenberg thrown in there, and a little bit of Christopher Walken. Oh my God, I'm Christopher Walken and I'm seeing people dying. A great movie. And the fact that Cronenberg makes this and Videodrome the same year is wild to me because those are both some of his best movies. And I mean, Cronenberg was, I think, one of the all-time greats. I would say Cronenberg's in the top 5 best horror filmmakers ever. I mean, you look at Shivers, you look at The Brood, you look at Rabid, you look at Scanners, even though I do think Scanners has pacing problems. You look at Videodrome, you look at The Dead Zone, you look at The Fly, you look at Dead Ringers. I mean, fucking Cronenberg's one of the fucking best ever. And Dead Zone is one of those great movies that he directed. And even though it didn't come from his mind, his directorial flair is all over this movie. And I would dare say, man, Christopher Walken, I know it's like kind of a parody now to make fun of him and how he does his impression and like the whole like being a Christopher Walken thing. I'm Christopher Walken, you know, like he's just very like it's almost become a joke and he knows it. It's almost like Nick Cage. It's very similar, like the Nick Cage. He's over because he's like over the top, and it's like people fucking gravitate towards it. It's very similar to how Nick Cage is over now. It's like, oh, we're in a cage match. Like everybody fucking, you know, throws babies in the air when they see one of these two guys. I don't know what it is. They're over. They're over like Rover. They just really are. But I dare I say it, I think this is Christopher Walken's best fucking performance. I mean, he's so good in this movie. And some of the visions he has where he's in the hospital and nurse, your house is going to burn down. Your child's inside. I mean, just some of the best stuff and some of the sequences where he's on the roller coaster and the way that fucking Cronenberg directs that stuff. I mean, that's how it's done. That's how it's like you want to fucking make horror movies. You want to fucking get into this business. I mean, it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of who you know, obviously. But if you want to do it right, especially if you're an indie filmmaker, you watch fucking Cronenberg and don't look back. That motherfucker is one of the best to ever do it. And I mean, The Dead Zone is no exception. A great Stephen King adaptation and this amazing directed movie. I can't gush about it enough. I love fucking The Dead Zone. I think Barbara Hershey was good in Woody Allen's Hannah and her sister and Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ. I think she was in both of those films. I like her as an actress more now, and it's mostly because of the entity. The ice is going to break. I mean, amazing. Nice impression, Grande. I mean, you know, Grande. I mean, you know. In the 2000s, there was also, that's right, the Anthony Michael Hall fucking Dead Zone. That's right. Dead Zone is so sad what happens in the film. I mean, like how he stops the Martin Sheen character from stopping nuclear war. Dude, yeah, no, exactly. It's a small role, but for me, Walken's role in True Romance is one of my all-time favorites. I was watching over the weekend this movie, I think it was called The New Rose Hotel. It's with Defoe, Ozzy Argento, and Christopher Walken. And man, he was great in it. It's like basically it's a movie where Christopher Walken is trying to hire Ozzy Argento for $1 million to seduce this guy. And fucking, he's so good at it, man. Like he's trying to convince her to do it and stuff. Like Christopher Walken is just money, man. I always really liked him. I really like The Dead Zone. The scissor scene is so intense. I mean, easily a top 5 for 83 for me. I mean, it's just such a fucking good movie. This was released in October of 83. It was a modest hit. It made like 20 million against a budget of 10. It was a big bounce back from the box office bomb that was Videodrome for Cronenberg, which is a shame because you may be seeing Cronenberg again later on this list. But I mean, it's a shame that Videodrome didn't make much money. But it's nice that this movie rebounded a little bit. I'd probably agree, Ronnie, that is probably Walken's best performance. In my opinion, yeah, for sure. Ciao Grande, I'm late, had to watch Red Rusty review of one of my favorite movies. Miss C is in the house. Welcome, Miss C. It's ironic The Dead Zone came out the same year James Bond movie Octopussy, and of course Christopher Walken later appeared 2 years later in A View to Kill. Of course, yeah, absolutely. I feel sorry for the doomed romance between Walken and his fiance, and I believe Brooke Adams plays his fiance. She's great, just perfect heart to the film. Grande, I hated the Tokyo Rose Hotel. I don't know that. Yeah, that's right. It's fucking the Cherry. I think it's the Cherry Rose Hotel. Abel Ferrara directed. That's right. It was Abel Ferrara film. I don't know. It had its moments. Christopher Walken stole the movie for me. But you know, The Dead Zone, highly fucking recommend if you haven't seen it. That's one that's like you can watch it for free on Amazon Prime. It's such a good movie with its visuals. You know, direction, acting, top to bottom. It's a perfect film, in my opinion. Brooke Adams, yeah. Oh, yeah. The Sicilian scene is incredible. Hey, Miss Carter. Deer Hunter, Walken, better than Dead Zone for me. Oh, well, fuck. That's a good point. The Russian roulette scene. I mean, fuck, man. That's such a good point. I don't know. Now I have to change my mind now. Mateo, you do this to me. I don't know. It's close. I would say this movie, but Deer Hunter maybe is. I would say Deer Hunter is a great movie too. That's a good fucking pick. But Let's move on. Let's move on from the Dead Zone because I do really enjoy that movie. I think that's a fucking banger. There was nothing in March of '83. However, let's look to April where we got a very, very interesting movie here from, of course, a legendary filmmaker who at this time, wasn't as well known yet, but would go on to be a huge, huge, huge director, and may he rest in peace. Tony Scott. Tony Scott's film The Hunger from 1983. This was, of course, David Bowie, Susan Sarandon, Catherine Deneuve. I always fuck up her name. I'm not good with French. I'm sorry. I took Spanish. I know Spanish. French, forget it. I don't know. I like French fries. That's about it. The Hunger, which I always thought was a very good fucking movie, like this sort of erotic horror movie, and just some of the fucking, you know, acting performances in the movie and the way that Tony Scott directed it. He was an up and comer at the time. To throw a movie like this into the market, I'm not sure. I want to see here if it got a wide release. It did. This got a wide MGM release in 1983, and I'm not sure how it did. But let's see, made like 10.2 million, which is not bad at all, considering I don't know, it doesn't give me a budget here. But I don't know. I always really liked this movie, especially for its makeup effects, costumes, stuff like that. This is a very ambitious horror movie and a very different horror movie for the time that it came out, right? Like, because like we were saying, I mean, there's a lot of monkey see, monkey do with the anthologies. This was a big let's try if we could make Creep Show again. Obviously they tried that. Let's do 3D. Of course, Friday the 13th 3D comes out in '82. They try Amityville 3D and fucking Jaws 3D in this year. There was a big 3D craze. They were still trying to rip off Friday the 13th with the slasher craze. So it's nice to see something as original as The Hunger here. And a movie not too different in aspect wise from another up and coming director at this time, from Michael Mann, would be The Keep, which also came out in 1983, which The Keep I have not seen in a long time. This is back when I did my Michael Mann. I was running through like Manhunter and fucking Heat and, movies like I believe. Oh my God, what the fuck else? I mean, so many Michael Mann films. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly, but I went on like a Michael Mann binge a few years ago. And this was one of the movies I watched. I hadn't seen it. And man, it blew me away, The Keep. But I didn't realize how much until my show prep, how much this movie was cut down. They cut the balls off this fucking movie. This movie was apparently supposed to be like 3 to 4 hours. Then they cut it down to 2. They did a test screening, and the people fucking hated it. So they cut its balls off again to get it down to like 96 minutes. So this movie went from like 4 hours to 96 minutes. And there's a ton of plot holes, a ton of things that don't make sense in the movie. I believe Michael Mann hates the film to this day. A fucking Thief with James Caan, by the way. That was the movie I was thinking of. That was Michael Mann movie that I watched, Thief, which I believe was just before this. But a damn good movie too. I mean, even though you hear the whole backstory where it had its balls cut off, which is a shame because I mean you have 3 to 4 hours of material and it ended up being just an hour and a half. I mean, that's rough. And as a director, I mean, that would probably be the worst thing in the world to see all your hard work and stuff. 2/3 of it is just cut away. More than 2/3 of it is just cut the fuck away. That's pretty lame. I've got to rewatch The Keep though. That's another one I really remember liking from 1983 and one that I definitely am due for a rewatch. The Hunger and The Keep, highly recommend. Two, I mean, top-notch filmmakers that were up and coming, right? Tony Scott wanted to do so many great movies. Michael Mann who wanted to do so many great movies. It's really interesting here as they're up and comers as they kind of enter with these independent horror movies. And instead of playing the monkey see, monkey do that was Hollywood, that is Hollywood, I suppose. It was nice to see them try something different. Couple of bad ones though. Let's get to some bad stuff because we've mostly been positive so far. Let's go with, oh my God, my camera just fucking bugged out. That's not good. Oh no. Okay, fixed it. Okay, excellent. So let's get into a couple of bad ones here because there's definitely we've been too positive on this show. So first bad one, Mountaintop Motel Massacre. What a piece of shit this movie is. This is one of those movies you can watch a Tubi. It's probably an hour, 19 minutes. It's a piece of shit. Hate it. The worst movie from 1983 horror-wise, which like I was saying, there's not a lot of bad in 83, but if I had to pick a worst, it's this movie right here. Boogeyman 2, Revenge of the Boogeyman, which is one of the biggest pieces of shit of all time. It is easily the worst video nasty that there ever was. Of course, directed by Uli Lamel, who brought us the first Boogeyman, which isn't a very good movie in and of its own right, but it's probably Uli Lamel's best movie. At least it has, vibrant colors and interesting visuals, dream sequences, stuff like that. Boogeyman 2 is your classic Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where it's instead of having the great Eric Freeman, it's a stock footage movie where a bunch of these people are sitting around a fucking pool for pretty much the entire movie, and we get flashbacks to the original Boogeyman. It is one of the biggest piece of shit movies. It's got to be in the top 10 worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Is Boogeyman 2, aka Revenge of the Boogeyman. It's like 50 plus minutes of stock footage, and the 30 new minutes we get, we don't even see a Boogeyman. It's just a bunch of assholes sitting around a fucking pool talking about nothing. Horrible. I mean, hate the Boogeyman 2, man. Big piece of shit. I'm looking here. Another bad one, The Prey. The Prey from 1983 is a really, granted, this one is 84 in some places. So this one's a borderline. I don't know if it was 83 or 84. I see a limited release in 83. So it did technically play in some theaters in 1983. And if it counts, it's a bad slasher movie. I would say it's one of the worst slasher movies that came out in 1983. Really bad wilderness slasher that teases its sleaze, but it doesn't really go there. I remember you have Jackie Coogan, who's Uncle Fester from the fucking Addams Family. He's in this randomly as a fucking sheriff, and every fucking scene, I kid you not, every fucking scene, Jackie Coogan is stuffing his fucking face eating. Like every scene. Like Jackie Coogan's, I'm like, what the fuck? Like every scene, Jackie fucking stuffing his face. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, does Jackie Coogan dying of starvation filming this movie? Like, did they just pay him in fucking cheeseburgers or something? Like, it's so fucking odd. Like, I always remember this movie just being so just damn odd, man. I don't know. It's odd. Another one that would be on the edge. A lot of places say 84. Some of them say 83. This movie is a huge inspiration to what would become the Final Destination movies. And it's Tom Eberhardt's film, Soul Survivor, that came out. Some places say 80, most places say 84, some say 83. So I don't want to cheat you guys here. I'm trying to cover as much as I can running through this. But Soul Survivor, which was an interesting Final Destination precursor, if you will, about a bunch of people. They're supposed to get on a plane. Somebody has a fucking, premonition. They get off the fucking plane. But instead of death coming to stalk them back, and the Rube Goldberg stuff and all the stuff that we know and love in the Final Destination movies, here it's like these zombie creatures, which it didn't work for this setup for me. However, 1984, this same director wanted to make a movie called Night of the Comet, which that setup, it totally works. So this whole comet comes and some people turn to dust, some people turn into zombies, and we have this whole fun zombie movie, 80s wise, with Cyndi Lauper songs playing in the mall, and girls just want to have fun, and the fucking just awesome fucking heart and fun and soul that movie has. Night of the Comet's a huge step up for Tom Eberhardt. I never really cared for Soul Survivor. So those are some bad ones that I wanted to throw in there. But there's also some other ones I want to get into here. I guess we get into another big one. Why not here? The highest grossing horror movie of 1983. You're maybe wondering, what is that? What is it going to be? Horror did not crack the top 10 of highest grossing movies in 1983. I mean, there was way more horror movies. I mean, just standard films that did better than horror. But if you're talking about the highest grossing, you look no further than the third sequel in the infamous Jaws series. Yes, the Jaws quadrilogy, if you will. This is Jaws 3D, directed by Joe Alves, of course, starring Dennis Quaid, which is always weird to see him in there. Of course, I always remember, oh my God, what the fuck is her damn name? It's beautiful. I'm gonna have to click on it and fucking, not Bess Armstrong. I know she's the other side lead, but I always had a crush on the other chick. What the fuck is her name? Leah Thompson is in this, who's fucking beautiful in this. I love Leah Thompson. Of course, I always remember her in the Tales from the Crypt episode, the Only Sin Deep, where she changes her face. There you go. Yeah, Slice your friend. We're on the same wavelength, brother. Leah Thompson, beautiful. I just love her in everything she's ever done. I mean, she's great. Jaws 3D, yeah, Jaws 3D grossed, and I can give you the exact number here of what Jaws 3D grossed. Jaws 3D grossed 88 million worldwide against a budget of 18. That's wild money. That's really fucking good money. And of course, like Amityville 3D didn't do. I mean, Amityville 3D made like $6 million against a $6 million budget, and fucking Jaws makes 88 against a budget of 18. I mean, that was a big summer blockbuster movie. I believe it dropped somewhere in July. Yes, July the 22nd of 83 to be exact. And I gotta be honest, of all the Jaws sequels, I always like Jaws 3D the best. I know a lot of people tell you Jaws 2, they'll tell you Jaws 2, and there's things about Jaws 2 I like. Jeanette Schwartz, he does an okay job as a director. Roy Scheider kind of phoned it in my opinion. I know he didn't want to be there. He was so upset that he had to come back and do a fucking sequel. Big fucking whoop, Roy Scheider. I'm sorry. Like everybody, I always felt that his argument that was like kind of like, dude, relax. And I know that he only did it because of a contractual obligation, so he didn't really want to be there. Jaws 2 is one of those movies where it's like, I know people like it, but I always like Jaws 3 better. And the reason I like Jaws 3D better is because it's Jaws made into a B movie. It's actually a fucking brilliant concept to do a Jaws movie in a theme park, a Jaws movie in Waterworld, and fucking, aquarium where all these people come and see the fucking fish and stuff like that. And we have all these dolphins that we, get to know, and there's these people that kind of riding these little like motor boats and stuff like that, and to release the shark upon the masses, I thought was a brilliant idea. And I know that the movie gets a lot of shit because the effects have not aged well. I mean, the effects have aged really poorly, and it's one of those movies where being in 3D hurts it on home video because there's no real way unless you have a Blu-ray 3D player and a Blu-ray 3D TV, you can't watch it in fucking 3D. So it doesn't work when you get to home video. That's the one big thing with a 3D film. It's not really going to work 9 times out of 10 when you take it home. So you kind of had to be there. You had to be a part of the $88 million that this movie grossed and going with the hype and the summer blockbuster of July of 1983 and going to see Jaws 3D in the theater. I totally feel like that's probably the most effective way to see it. But I always really liked Jaws 3D. I like the acting performances. I know Dennis Quaid has buried the movie. He always says, which Jaws was I in again? He hated the movie. A lot of people bury the fucking movie. But I never understood quite why. Okay, yes, is it the fucking first Jaws? No. What the fuck is the first Jaws? I feel like that's such an unfair criticism. It's just a fun B slasher shark movie in the fucking water world with a cool setting, right? That's slasher movies. We change up the setting, automatically you get some brownie points. I always remember the fucking sequence where Leah Thompson gets attacked, her leg gets all cut up. I always thought that was some intense stuff. The whole blowing the shark up as it's crashing through the glass at the end. Louis Gossett Jr. I don't know. I always really just had a fun time with it. It's a dumb, fun movie. It's one of those movies where it's like, I could enjoy it, turn my brain off. The bad one to me is Jaws the Revenge, which comes out in 1987. Also directed by Joe Sargent, I believe, who, of course, did Nightmares in 83. Also directs that piece of shit. Jaws the Revenge is the bad one. That's the one where I don't, and I know some people can have that turn their brain off and enjoy it. That movie's fucking bad, in my opinion, because it's so taking itself seriously, and it's just fucking horrible with this fucking shark that swam from Amity to the fucking Bahamas. And there's not even a body count, really, in Jaws the Revenge. Everybody survives Jaws the Revenge. I hate Jaws the Revenge. It's a piece of shit with a body count of 2 motherfuckers. No, like the good, bad Jaws movies, Jaws 3D. I always felt that way. I always thought of the sequels. If I'm going to watch a Jaws sequel, I watch this one. And I wish they could find a way to make the 3D work at home, because it would be a fun movie night with friends. But I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. One of those where at the time, it probably would have been the movie to catch in theaters because it was the biggest horror box office hit of 1983. So definitely worth mentioning here. Let's see. The opening song, Bela Lugosi's song, is a very seductive song. Absolutely. I think David Bowie is one of the best musician actors of all time. Totally agree. I meant dead. I like French horror and French fries. Sure. So do I. David Bowie is an artist with a capital A. Love Bowie. Dude, nothing but respect for Bowie. Red Rusty's in the house. Welcome, Red Rusty. Top 83. Mine would be Sleepaway Camp, Cujo, Christine, The Final Terror, and Videodrome would be my top 5. Wow, that's crazy how many of those are on my fucking top 5, too. The Hunger is great. I already mentioned The Hunger. Speaking of Boogeyman 1 of the Stephen King short stories coming out in theaters, that's right. They're fucking making a Boogeyman again. I know the first Boogeyman trilogy, that didn't work in America. People saying hi to each other. Same year, Night of the Comet, which was 84. That was definitely 84, but it goes back and forth with Soul Survivor when it was really released. It had limited distribution in 83, so I mentioned it. Something to See. I liked and owned Soul Survivor. Great little film. Okay. Jaws 3D movie itself ain't bad. It's just the awful 3D effects. Yeah, it doesn't age well for people. It's aged like the opposite of a fine wine. People think it's a piece of shit now. It's like one of the lowest rated sequels. I never felt that way. I think the setting, atmosphere, acting, fucking, all of it. Just a colorful fucking film. Always like Jaws 3D and don't really understand why people get so. The people say it's worse than Jaws 4. I'm like, I don't fucking get that on what planet. Like, what fucking parallel dimension are you in that Jaws 4 is better than Jaws 3? I'll never get it. I can see saying Jaws 2. Jaws 3 is better than Jaws 4. I'm sorry. Absolutely nothing wrong with Jaws 3. I agree, ATG Nat Podcast. Welcome, my friend. Hope all's well with you. 2 years later, Leah Thompson later landed the role as Marty McFly's mother, Lorraine Baines McFly in Back to the Future. Of course, and also, she was in Howard the Duck, having some voluptuous sex with Howard the Duck. Have I mentioned Sledgehammer Net? I have not. We can get there, though. Absolutely. Grande, Michael Caine takes movies based on the place where they're filming. I think he was in. No, that was Jaws the Revenge, which people asked him. So Jaws the Revenge was filming when he was nominated for and won an Academy Award. He missed accepting his only Academy Award win of his life because he was filming Jaws the Revenge. And people asked him, like, oh, hey, have you seen the movie? Like, what do you think of the movie? And he said, no, I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the patio that it bought me. So very fucking funny that he took the movie as a paycheck because it was filming in the Bahamas and stuff like that. And I just always thought it was so rotten that the one Oscar win of his career, he misses it, account of shooting arguably the worst film he was ever a part of. Just so insane. I wonder if Amity and Amityville are somehow connected. Well, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Murray Hamilton was at both. I did see Jaws 3D in the theaters. I still remember that fish part floating in front of my eyes. It was fun. Theater Revenge was garbage. I agree. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I wish I had seen Jaws 3D in the theater. Like, if there's one of these movies in 83 I could go see in a theater, in 1983, like if I had the proverbial time machine, it would be Jaws 3D. I would just want to see that with a fucking sold out crowd with the actual proper 3D. I don't know. Maybe you can answer this, Rusty. Was it the red blue or was it that state of the art, like the good 3D? Like, I don't know what 3D. I know Friday 13th was the standard. Amityville 3D was the red blue. But I don't know what Jaws 3D. I don't know. And maybe you can answer. Anyone who's seen Jaws 3D in the theater, please let me know what 3D was used. The first Boogeyman, 1980, has some pretty wild kills. Jaws 3D is great, better than D'Amato's Deep Blood. I would agree completely with that. The first Boogeyman's getting the Vinegar Syndrome treatment on 4K. So another fucking video nasty to add to the collection. I think Caine won the Oscar for Maybe Hannah and Her Sisters when that happened. That's right. Maybe I'm wrong. Might have got the dates messed up. It was 87. I meant The Last Starfighter. Well, I love The Last Starfighter. I Love to Cook is here. Hey, that's awesome. Welcome. Oh, I love cock. Sorry, you love cock. I apologize. I love to cook. I love, with yin and yang, potato. Because I started watching the Oscars in 87, so I'm wrong. Well, no, you're not. 87 was the year it happened. So it was the red blue glasses, but they were some weird different glasses than the others I had seen. And yeah, I remember trying to touch and hold the stuff floating in my face, so it was good. Awesome, man. That is very awesome. I don't know. I wish I had been there. I just would. It's a shame that they used the red blue because I know Friday 13th was the state of the art. Like it was the 3D how it is now, like clear. So that's like really cool to me. But I don't know, the whole red blue thing. It's the cheap way to go with it. But at the same time, I don't know. I would think Jaws 3D definitely had more money behind it. Definitely had more money behind it than a Friday the 13th 3 did. But I mean, it is neither here nor there, I guess. I don't know. But we could get into my number 3, which this movie, I actually just reviewed it just a few weeks ago when I did my Cursed Object show. So I don't know how long we'll stay on this one, but it's definitely one of the best of the year 1983 and another Stephen King adaptation. A John Carpenter movie. Yes, this is John Carpenter's Christine. A nerdish boy buys a strange car with an evil mind of its own, and his nature starts to change to reflect it. Yes, Christine, one of the best horror movies out there. I mean, I love Christine. I mean, I did go in depth just a few weeks ago, so I don't know how long I want to spend on Christine, like I was saying, but I love the acting overall. I just love the Arnie Cunningham character and the whole cast. I love Kelly Preston in the small role. Always cool to see her in anything. I mean, may she rest in peace. Keith Gordon, John Stockwell, the old man from Home Alone. I always remember is the guy that sells him the car. I really, really like the whole entire cast of this movie. And of course, the direction from John Carpenter. I mean, he was coming off the box office bomb, although it was the best movie ever made, was The Thing in 82, big box office bomb that movie was. He turns around here and does a director for hire job, which is hard. He said he wasn't as into it, but he did give it his best. And man, John Carpenter directs the hell out of this movie and hits a fucking home run. I just love how fucking well done and directed this movie is, from all the sequences with Christine, running down these people, the car being on fire, and the whole way that Keith Gordon sort of changes. He starts off with this nerdy kid who wouldn't harm a fly, and then he slowly but surely, snowballs into this awful kid, and he starts, turning evil. And some of the scare sequences, horror sequences in this that really scared the shit out of me, like I was mentioning in the episode with the girlfriend character, who she's eating the burger in the car. And he gets out of the car, it's pouring rain, and she starts to choke to death on the burger, and the lights kind of bright flash in her face, and she's choking to death, and she's screaming for help and stuff. That is one of the scariest horror sequences ever, where you're like, oh my God, like, holy shit, is this bitch going to choke to death? And he's banging on the glass and stuff like that. And the car always plays some classic, like 50s, I'm bad in the bone, or you came on knocking, but you can't come in. Da-da-da-da. I mean, great stuff. I love that stuff. I mean, the car having a personality of its own was brilliant. And the car refurnishing itself after it's been smashed up or broken glass or any of that stuff, it can repair itself. The car really, they did so much with it, considering the low budget that they had. And I don't know, I thought, there was nobody better at that time to direct it than a John Carpenter, especially coming off a box office bomb that was, of course, The Thing. He turns around, makes Christine, which definitely was a bigger hit. I mean, it wasn't a giant smash, but it was a bigger hit than, of course, The Thing had been the year prior. And I think it's a movie that John Carpenter really needed to direct at the time. I know, Stephen King was going wild at this time. This was, of course, the year of Cujo, the year of The Dead Zone, the year of Christine. And I think of the Stephen King adaptations that came out in 1983, I look no further than Christine as the best one. I think it's Dead Zone. I think it's Christine, Dead Zone, Cujo, and all three of those are great, great horror movies. Like, I highly recommend all of them. But Christine is just a masterpiece of horror, in my humble opinion. The book kind of gives me more info about Darnell, that he has a criminal activity. I've always liked Christine, but I don't think Carpenter was a huge fan of it. He did it for director for hire. He wasn't really that into it, unfortunately. But man, like, you could have fooled me if you didn't tell me that, like they have. I mean, I would think it was just one of his favorite movies they ever did, because it's just so fucking good, man. It's so good. Now, this was him working with a studio, right? Dean Cundey had stepped away to do the number 2 film on my list. Funny enough, he's the director of photography for the number 2 film on my list, so we'll get there. But I really love Christine. I think it's great. Roberts Blossoms, he was also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I never got into Christine. I have come to respect it, but never bought into Boy being interested in humping a car, but not a hot girl. What the fuck? Well, he was interested in humping her too. Come on now. He was just it. I think he sees himself in the car. I think that's the whole point of the movie, is that, he finds something as ugly and as dismissed as himself, and he finds a piece of himself and loses it in that car. He loses not only his personality, not only his heart and soul, but he loses his mind somewhere in Christine's leather seats. And man, I just think that's horror done right. I love, like, you think, killer car, how could that be a fucking serious movie? watch Christine. Like it's a fucking great movie. This came out in December, late December, weirdly enough. I was already geek crushed on Keith Gordon from Dress to Kill, so Christine was kind of hot in many ways to me. LMAO. Very nice. Okay, you enjoy a little Keith Gordon action. I understand. Grande, have you thought of the book versus film show? I have not. I've never. I mean, I usually prepare for these in about a week. So if I did film versus book, I would have to read a fucking book in less than a week. I mean, I don't know. It'd be hard to do. Halloween 3, would that be Grande? I love Halloween 3. Halloween 3 was 82 though. But we do have some other interesting third entries of series on here. If you ever watched the deleted scenes in Christine, it reveals that the blonde hair bully is crushed by a car on a car lift, while in the movie it appears that he dies in an explosion. That's right. Grande talking about Christine. Have you ever seen Cronenberg's Crash? Love Cronenberg's Crash. That's a great movie. Though I've got to disagree with you, Grande. He wasn't into the girl once he bought Christine. Well, I don't know. He made out with her when he was in Christine. That's just saying. But that is my number 3 for the top 5. Let's jump back. We'll start jumping around again, ladies and gents. Of course, Cujo, the other Stephen King adaptation. I guess we could briefly run through Cujo, of course, directed by the legendary Louis Teague, who, again, we've talked about with Alligator recently. Of course, Cat's Eye, one of my favorite anthology horror films, in my top 5 anthology horror films. And to me, the pinnacle role of Dee Wallace. If I was to give a Best Actress award for 1983, it would probably be Dee Wallace in Cujo. I mean, I love how fucking good she is in this movie as the mom and this fucking vicious Saint Bernard trying to kill her and her son in the car. I mean, I always thought Cujo was just such a well-made movie, so well directed, so well crafted from a direction standpoint. And that was Louis Teague, man. Louis Teague was coming off Alligator, where he makes, in my opinion, the best Jaws ripoff, and then turns around and makes Cujo the best killer dog film. Easily, like without, I mean, I like Man's Best Friend with Lance Henriksen, Ali Sheedy. I like that movie, but I don't think any fucking killer dog movie comes close to how good fucking Cujo is. How scary, brutal, and just well acted it is, man. Dee Wallace, you could have gave her a fucking Oscar for how good she is in this movie. And she's horror royalty. I mean, of course, I always remember as in The Hills Have Eyes. I always remember in, of course, the mom from E.T. I always remember in The Howling. I think her best standout performance is in Cujo. I mean, I love Cujo. If there was a top 6, it probably would be number 6. But I didn't want to have like 3 Stephen King films all making the top 5. So this one was the bubble boy out. I do like The Dead Zone and, of course, Christine a little bit better. But that is neither here nor there. We have some folk horror here. Eyes of Fire, which the director of this just passed away. May he rest in peace. Avery Krontz. I don't know how to pronounce the director's last name. I know he just passed away, but Eyes of Fire is a damn good fucking folk horror movie in similar vein to, the original folk trilogy, whether it be The Wicker Man, whether it be Blood on Satan's Claw, whether it be The Witchfinder General. This is an awesome little early 80s folk horror movie. And I believe it was shot in Kentucky, which is an interesting location to film a folk horror movie. But man, I love some of the visuals in this and some of the uses of the horrors of nature. That's the thing about folk horror that always kind of gets my gears going is the whole using the beauty of the earth and turning it on its head, making it horrific. And Eyes of Fire is one of those movies that it just does that so damn well. You could get the Blu-ray special edition from, I believe, Severin put it out. And man, I have it over there. It's an awesome Blu-ray. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. To me, folk horror done perfect, in my humble opinion. I really, really enjoy that one. Let me see. Back to comments. Speaking of Jaws, Keith Gordon was also in the sequel. That's right. Didn't Cujo use more than one dog in that film? I believe so, yes. D gave me a serious panic attack along with that screaming kid in Cujo. It was anxiety hell. That's the thing, man. Like, they fucking really butter you up. I mean, it's so fun. Like I always say this, Louis Teague knew how to build tension. Like I mentioned all 3 of those movies. Alligator builds great tension. Same with fucking Cat's Eye with the "just keep me on your toes" or the Quitters Inc. segment with James Wood, where I'll be watching you. All the tension he builds as a director, man, he really knew how to do it. I think like Louis Teague would have been a very interesting choice to direct a movie that we're going to talk about in a little bit, my number 2 favorite movie. But man, I think Louis Teague is great. I always thought of Cujo being like a horror version of Old Yeller, where instead of the Cujo contracting rabies at the end, he contracts them at the beginning. Very interesting point. Totally. Grande, have you seen Samuel Fuller's White Dog about a racist dog? No, I haven't. That doesn't sound interesting to me at all. Cujo is my favorite Stephen King adaptation. Every time I watch this movie, it still scares the hell out of me. Yeah, no, it's so fucking good. How about a show featuring bad films? I've done that. I've definitely done that before, for sure. But at Missy, it's very cool to hear that that's your favorite Stephen King adaptation, because it's a damn good one. Like, I think that's a very, very good pick for favorite Stephen King adaptation, because it's a very solid film. Some other ones I definitely want to mention. Let's see. How about ones I haven't seen? Let's see. Ones I haven't seen. Never seen Grizzly 2, The Revenge. I've seen Grizzly 1 and William Girdler joined. I always really liked that. Mortuary with Mary Beth McDonough and Bill Paxton. I've never seen that. Let's see. Olivia, directed by Uli Lamel. I can only imagine how fucking bad that is. Scalps, directed by Fred Olen Ray, which I'm sure that's an entertaining movie. Let's see. And not as many as I thought that I hadn't seen on here. I thought there was more that I definitely hadn't fucking seen, but most of these, yeah, so far. American Nightmare, that's one I haven't seen. Michael Ironside, Laura Staley, that's one I haven't seen. I'm still going down the list here of ones that I'm trying to find ones that maybe I haven't seen here. Of Unknown Origins, a great movie. George P. Cosmatos, who would go on to direct, Rambo 2, Cobra, Leviathan. That's a really good banger horror movie from 1983. Sweet 16, I have seen that. That's a very, very run-of-the-mill slasher movie, but it does have Dana Kimmel in it, which is following year from, of course, Friday the 13th Part 3D, where she's the lead in that. She's in that, but I don't remember that movie being anything special, Sweet 16. The Lift, there you go, The Lift from 1983. How about a haunted elevator movie, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, The Lift came out in 1983, which that's a very fucking creepy movie, even though it sounds so dumb. And I know they did the remake from the same director, which was called, I forget the fucking remake. The remake was with Naomi Watts, and it was right around the time she did Ring, and right around the time she did Mulholland Drive, and fucking the remake played it more up for laughs, it was more comedy driven. And you have the Love in an Elevator. I mean, just a very cheesy remake. But the original movie, I actually think was scary in some ways. I actually thought was effective in some of its scares. A very fun idea to make a killer elevator film. Again, how would that work? And it somehow pull it off. I mean, I like it. To me, it's so embracing the era that it's in, and that is the 1980s. I mean, it's just such a fun fucking movie. I love The Lift. I think that's a really fucking good one, man. I think that Louis Teague wanted to give the film a happy ending because at the book, the character of Tad dies. That's right. Sorry, Grande. Don't be sorry. All good. Grande, White Dog is not a racist movie. The owner of the dog is racist, and the dog is retrained not to be a racist. Okay. Interesting. Again, I don't know. I'm good on that shit. OMGF, I adore The Lift. That was so cheesy and good. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I love The Lift too. I think it's a good one. I keep trying to find it. I think I'm going to have to settle for the DVD. For an old DVD to have it. Well, they I believe Blue Underground has it out, and it's cheap. You get it for less than $10 from Blue Underground. Really fun one. The remake is called The Shaft. That's right. Naomi Watts is in the remake called The Shaft, where they just dialed it up to the fucking original is dialed up to 10. The remake is dialed up to 20, where you have a pregnant lady in the elevator and it goes up and just drops down and she gives fucking birth and the baby's, it's oh my God. They have a guy shooting a fucking bazooka into the elevator. It's fucking funny, man. Both those movies directed by the same guy, and they're very different tonally. The original movie is much more slow burn horror, whereas the remake was fuck it, we're making a killer elevator movie. Let's be as stupid with this as we fucking can. The Lift, definitely one I recommend, directed by Dick Moss, which is that's a porn name. Dick Moss, baby. One that Mernsey was mentioning to me, which I can't fucking believe the budget of this movie and how good it is. And it's The Deadly Spawn. The Deadly Spawn, amazing fucking creature feature from 1983. Get this, the budget of The Deadly Spawn was $25,000. That's fucking insane. to get the movie that you get, the quality fucking creature feature that you get in The Deadly Spawn, fun, entertaining, fucking just really good over the top fucking horror movie. And they made it for 25 grand. It's wild. Amityville 3D came out the same year, has $6 million budget, 3D technology, and it's boring as tears. Yet you have the fucking Deadly Spawn come out, 25 grand, and it's a banger. I mean, I love fucking Deadly Spawn. That's one that I definitely had to mention on here. Love the tagline, take the stairs. For God's sakes, take the scares. That's fucking great. I didn't know that was the tagline. That's amazing tagline. Super fucking fitting. But yeah, no, Deadly Spawn is one that, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's such a fucking good movie. And one that I definitely highly recommend if you guys are into more practical. Here's Birdsey saying, yes, it's so good. Seriously, the practical effects are so well done. The alien drooling and all the little babies, it's amazing. Yeah, no, it's like the fact that they made it for 25 grand. Like, what the fuck, man? That's fucking wild. Like, how the hell does a movie with that low budget have that good special make effects? That's the goal to show you. Like, and again, it's a short film. It's not a long film. Mateo is down here asking me how much it made. That's a good question. We can check how much it made. I don't think it was a monster hit. I don't think it had a wide release. So the budget was 25 grand, but I'm trying to look up how much it made. Let's see. Did it reception? Oh, wow. I can't find it. That's interesting. I don't know if anyone wants to double check me on this, but I cannot find how much the Deadly Spawn grossed. I'll try to search it for you here. Deadly Spawn. And how much did it fucking gross? Grossed. I don't not say. It doesn't say. It does not say. Well, I'm sure, I will say this. I'm sure it recouped its fucking budget. I'm sure, because all it would have to fucking do is make like 100 grand and it made a nice profit. So I'm sure it made its money back. I don't see it here, though. That's a very good question. I don't know. The movie was known in the UK as The Return of the Aliens, The Deadly Spawn. Well, it's such a fucking good movie. Like, I actually cannot believe for how low of a budget it was made for, too. Like, that's wildly low money. But man, it's still a damn good movie in my humble opinion. I really like Deadly Spawn. Highly recommend that one. But let's move on into my number 2. And this movie, of all the movies that came out in 1983, there was none that, in my humble opinion, was in more of a kind of no-win situation. And that's why it's amazing where I find itself the number 2 slot in my top 5 of this year. Because it was a no-win situation. You're making a sequel to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. You're making a sequel 23 years later without Alfred Hitchcock. You're making a sequel that nobody ever thought they would make. I mean, this is a movie that Anthony Perkins, when they first brought it to him, he didn't want to do. He said, you can't fucking do a sequel to Psycho. Can't do it. You just can't do it. And somehow, in a no-win situation, they won big time. And to me, coming at number 2, it's none other than Psycho 2 from 1983. I love this movie. Brief plot synopsis. After 22 years of psychiatric care, Norman Bates attempts to return to a life of solitude, but the specters of his crimes and his mother continue to haunt him. Psycho 2. Wow. Just wow. I've always been amazed by how good this movie is, because there's no right to be as good as it is. It has no fucking right to be anywhere near as good to the original movie. And it's just as good, if not better, in my opinion. It's incredible. I mean, here you have Tony Perkins, who for 23 fucking years sat on this role, sat on Norman Bates. And I wouldn't even harm a fly. And the sadistic smile at the end of Psycho. We all remember the shower scene in Psycho. We all remember, Martin Balsam falling down the steps. But what most people remember is that I wouldn't harm a fly. And as he breaks the fourth wall, smiles demonically into the camera, and we end credits. I mean, Psycho, one of the most infamous and influential and popular horror films of all time. It's in the top 5 horror films that ever gets mentioned, for sure. Like, everybody knows Psycho, whether you're fucking old, young, whatever the fuck. everybody remembers Psycho. So doing a sequel to it seems unfathomable. Unfathomable, especially without an Alfred Hitchcock who was dead by this point. I believe he was dead by this point. How do you, improve upon perfection, what many would say? And man, you get Tom Holland pre-Fright Night, pre-Child's Play, Langoliers for people that, watch that movie, Stephen King fans. You get Tom Holland to write it. You get Richard Franklin, who was a student of Alfred Hitchcock, to direct and kind of make this film in his honor, making a lot of the shots and camera angles and stuff like that in Hitchcock's honor. And sure enough, instead of doing Christine, Dean Cundey comes on to do the director of photography here for Psycho 2. And he hit a home run. I mean, the scope of this movie, Dean Cundey at this time was the best cinematographer in the world. He was undoubtedly the best in the fucking game at this time. All the Carpenter movies, fucking Fog, Halloween, Thing, this movie right here, Psycho 2, it's just shot masterfully. But I think what stands out most about it is the performance from Tony Perkins. It's the best male performance of this entire year in horror, man, and one of the best of all times. As, like I said, he sat on that role for 23 years, where he mainly liked playing a teen heartthrob, right? He played a lot of, love interest in films. Like he was in a lot of films with Audrey Hepburn playing the love interest. He was a big love interest character actor. He loved playing that role. And of course, he's playing a psychopath. He's playing someone with the whole horrors of what his mother did to him as he's grown up, and the horrors of the boy trapped inside himself, and all those horrors that kind of manifest themselves here in Psycho 2 as he's released to the public. Much of this may have, of course, Vera Miles, who returns in this movie, and he's working the job in the diner. He meets Meg Tilly's character, who I fucking, if there was, I know I said Dee Wallace is best actress. Meg Tilly in this movie is Oscar worthy too. I mean, she's great in it, to the point where I was like, what the fuck? When I did my show prep and found out that Meg Tilly hated working on this movie, hated working with Tony Perkins, hated the director, didn't attend the premiere of Psycho 2. She said to this day was the worst film project she ever worked on. And just 2 years down the road, she gets nominated with Agnes in Love, or Agnes for Love, something like that. She gets nominated for Best Actress Award at the Academy Awards. Man, she's fucking great here. And her chemistry, even though they hated each other in real life, you would never fucking know it, as the two of them recreate some of the scenes from the first movie. Of course, the having dinner and the sandwiches, and the boy's best friend is his mother. Here, they're eating a sandwich, and hey, do you have a knife so I cut the sandwich in half? And the way Tony Perkins, I'm afraid I don't have one. It's delayed and I don't have any cutlery. Like he botches the line, but he kept it in there because that's what a psycho would do. And she's cutting the sandwich in front of him, and he's having the PTSD and the fear and the horror on his face. Man, Tony Perkins nails it in this role. I mean, one of my favorite fucking performances in horror's history is Tony Perkins in Psycho 2. Because like I said, he had 23 years to sit on this role, and I think he masters it here. Psycho 3, I know actually it's sad. Psycho 3 really sent him in a very downward spiral in his real life, and actually I think was like a big start to the end of his life. When we get, we can get to Psycho 3 another time, but it is what it is. Psycho 4, the beginning, is what it is, even though I do love me some Olivia Hussey, baby, but that's neither here nor there. This movie, he perfected this role. I mean, it's great. Some of the scenes where he's afraid that he's seeing visions of his mother again in the window, and that he's thinking the mother is fucking with the fucking furniture and stuff like that. That stuff is great. I mean, how he's all afraid about it. Sorry, we lost a little bit of the, try to focus this camera here again. But some of the scenes he has with Meg Tilly as he's sitting in the room and she's trying to sleep, and he has the knife and he's thinking about killing her. She wakes up and, wait a minute, sit down. And she kind of embraces and coddles him. And he says, you smell like my mother. You smell like my mother's cheese toasted sandwiches. And, he gives this whole kind of spiel. And man, like, it's just some of the best stuff you've ever seen. And she says, stop thinking about all the bad, stop thinking about the bad, and focus on the good, and focus on the good that she brought to your life. And man, it's very heartfelt. I love Psycho 2. It's just such a fucking good movie, and it's better than it had any fucking right to be to me. And man, the scare sequences and the psychological sequences, very well done, very Hitchcockian, very much paying tribute to Alfred Hitchcock. But I think too, the difference of this film and the first film, they go for sympathy here for Norman Bates. And I never thought that would work. You have a guy that's a psychopath, right? How are you going to make me feel sympathetic for him? I know what he's capable of. I know what he's done in the first film. They make you feel sympathy for this guy, and you fucking do. Because you learn what's going on, of course. I assume everybody's seen fucking Psycho 2 by now. Meg Tilly and Vera Miles, they're trying to set him up, and Meg Tilly about halfway through is like, we got to stop this. He'll be fine if we just stop fucking with him. They're calling him on the phone, pretending to be the mother. He's buying into it. There's notes left every now and again from the mother, like, get this whore out of my house, Norman, all this stuff. Just great. In my opinion, Tom Holland showed his capability as the filmmaker and writer that he would become. 2 years later, he makes Fright Night, which is arguably one of the best horror movies ever, and arguably the best horror movie of 1985, which is my favorite year in the history of horror. It's Fright Night. I mean, Fright Night's great. I mean, it's one of those movies where everybody fucking loves Fright Night. I've never met somebody that says they hate Fright Night. Like, it's just a great movie, and you could see his capability as when he would go on to direct The Child's Play and Down the Road and stuff like that. Man, he writes this movie and does a great job. And I know Tony Perkins. He said he initially said no, and it wasn't until he read the script where he was like, holy shit, like, this is actually really fucking good, and I'd like to be a part of this. And of course, that's how they got him to sign on, was because of writing from Tom Holland. It was just that fucking good. Of course, the score in this movie by Jerry Goldsmith is incredible too. Of course, Jerry Goldsmith coming off First Blood in 82. Jerry Goldsmith does the score here, and apparently Anthony Perkins went in his car, played the fucking score on a cassette. They gave him a pre-cassette, and he broke down in tears in his car. He was like, this is my big comeback. I'm going to be a big star again. Like, my career was hitting a wall, and I'm going to be a big star again because of Psycho 2. And man, Psycho 2 was a big hit. It made $34 billion in 1983. That's nothing to scoff at. It came out the following week of Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi comes out May the 25th. Psycho 2 comes out June the 3rd, and Psycho 2 held its own. Now, nothing's going to beat a Star Wars at the box office, especially in 1983. Hell, especially anytime. You're not beating Star Wars at the box office. But grossing 34 million, man, that's nothing to scoff at. That is fucking incredible money. And in my opinion, man, he does a great job fucking acting, man. Tony Perkins is fantastic in this movie. I can't tell you enough. Like, go see Psycho 2 if you haven't, because it's one of those sequels where it's so much fucking better than it has any right to be. I broke the internet. Dude, yeah, you did. I did not compute. Dude, that's why. See, Vincent should be putting something like Deadly Spawn out on a Blu-ray. That totally needs an upgrade. Highly recommend. They really killed that old lady at the end. Oh, did they? Yeah. They kind of reversed the roles of Norman Bates and Lila Crane, where the original has. Yes, exactly. That's very true. They do that here, and it works. It somehow works. Grande, that I wouldn't hurt a fly, breaking the fourth wall with a skull put over his face. Dude, brilliant. I mean, that's what I always remember from the original Psycho. The movie also had Meg Tilly, who was Jennifer Tilly's, yes, that's her younger sister. And of course, she would later become Tiffany. That's right. Meg Tilly was at this time beautiful, by the way, like very eye. Grande, Hitchcock died in 1980. Okay. Vertigo was my favorite Hitchcock, and Psycho a close second. Love both of them. I agree. Meg Tilly's number one. She's a great actress, like great actress. Like to the point where I'm watching this, I'm like, how the fuck was she not up for anything for this? Like, their chemistry, it's so wild because I looked into it, like, why did they hate each other? She apparently grew up in like a very strict household where they weren't allowed to watch TV or film. Very similar like Wes Craven. I don't know if it was like religious like Wes Craven, but they couldn't watch movies. And what happened was she didn't realize the success or the fame of the original movie. So when they started making this movie, she said one day out loud, like, why the fuck all this press for Perkins? Like, where's my press? And he apparently got fucking pissed about it and he wanted her fired. And the fucking director hated her. They all hated her. But man, I'll tell you one thing. I'm glad they didn't fucking fire Meg Tilly because Meg Tilly is the second best thing in this movie. That's how good Meg Tilly is in this. Like she holds her own as the fucking second lead in this. Like so fucking good. And some of the scenes where she's stabbing his hands and he doesn't know what to do. Oh, I'll get us out. Mother, you know, she's stabbing his hands and he's crying and wincing in pain. And I mean, so good. I agree. I did love Psycho 2. It was a great sequel. If anyone wants to see his first Psycho film, he plays a serial killer in the 1960, I'm sorry, maybe 57 film called The Fool Killer. It's amazing, shocking at the time. Agnes of God. That's right. That's right. She was nominated for Best Actress at that, which is, you know, only a couple of years after this. Psycho was Hitchcock's cheapest film and his most profitable. Vertigo was his most expensive and his least profitable. Well, that happens. I'm sure, but both of those movies are better than fucking Rope, though. I'll tell you that much. Tom Holland is a cameo. That's right. He's the deputy. That's right. Yeah. Sad because I know he goes on to direct Psycho 3 in 86. I think Psycho 3 is 86. He does that. Psycho 3 bombs. He went into a deep depression. And that's on the set of that movie is where he got diagnosed with AIDS. That's what he found out. He had AIDS. And he dies by early 1990s. So it's really sad, man. May Tony Perkins rest in peps. I've only seen the first Psycho, so we'll definitely, dude, wow, you've totally got to watch Psycho 2. I can't believe that. Dude, you'll mark out for it because it's such a good movie. Before there was Bates Motel TV series, there was always Bates, yes, with fucking, with Tank Girl, right? Lori Petty's in the fucking TV movie. Grande, I saw Bates House and Hotel during the Universal Studios tour with my family. That's awesome. Yeah, this was the same set. The motel was different, but the house and stuff like that was all the same stuff. I think he took his emotional level from The Fool Killer. So when Psycho came along, he already had it because he acts the same deep damage Psycho and Fool Killer. Very cool to hear. Goldsmith does the score in Alien. That's right. I think Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver and directed Hardcore and Affliction, and I think he couldn't watch films growing up. I think I saw Psycho 2, 3, but not 2. Well, I highly recommend you watch Psycho 2. Psycho 2 comes in at the number 2 slot of the entire year. Overall, man, one of the better horror movies that has come out in this year. I mean, and like I said, it was a movie that was in a no-win situation. You're making a sequel to a perfect movie by most accounts. You're doing it without the guy that directed it. You're just asking for failure. You're just asking for bad reviews and people sticking their noses up at you and saying, this is the original Psycho. I know a lot of people that will tell you it's better than the first movie. I don't know if I'm in that ballpark. I would lean towards it because I probably watched Psycho 2 more. And it's much more my type of movie. It's more of a horror movie for sure. But like I said, I would say just for Meg Tilly and fucking Tony Perkins alone, I would watch it over the original movie just because their chemistry is just some of the best stuff. Like, all due respect, Janet Leigh, but like the chemistry between he and fucking Meg Tilly was just off the charts. It was just so good. And it's just so weird that they hated each other, you know, in real life. It's just kind of wild. So let's run through a few more and then we'll get into my number one pick. You had a Lamberto Bava joint, A Blade in the Dark. Very, very good Giallo movie from 1983. Highly recommend that one. Again, this one, some people say 82, some people say 83. I have it as 83 here. I don't know. I really like this movie. Lamberto Bava was, of course, coming off Macabre at the time, which came out in 1980, which is an awesome movie, which if you haven't seen Macabre, it's another really great one where this woman loses her husband in a car accident. His head's decapitated, and she's keeping his dead head in the fridge. And it's doing some very sexual things with the fucking decapitation. You talk about getting good head. She fucking keeps her dead husband's head in the refrigerator. One of the craziest Italian horror movies that there is. Love Macabre. But this was his follow-up, which is a very much more serious film, you know, in the vein of his father, Mario Bava. Not exactly. He never quite reached Mario Bava level, right? Like, of course, we all love Demons. We all love Macabre. But when it comes to Lamberto Bava, he never reached his dad's status. Like, he never reached the Blood and Black Lace. He never reached Black Sunday. He never reached, Bay of Blood. He never reached that pinnacle that his dad had. But man, Lamberto Bava put out some quality stuff too. And A Blade in the Dark is a very passable, good Giallo film that I really quite like. So I'd recommend that one for sure. I really like A Blade in the Dark. I'm trying to go down the list here, make sure I haven't left out. I'm trying to mention most stuff. The Final Terror, I remember thinking was really bad. I believe that was directed. Who the fuck directed this? Andrew Davis, who would go on to direct Holes, which is one of my favorite fucking movies. The boring. That's the one fucking Final Terror. Dull, boring, alien slasher teen movie, horrible. And never really liked the Final Terror. Just below average movie. Rachel Ward, I think, was in it. Daryl Hannah was in it too. That's right. Fuck, I just looked it up. Daryl Hannah's fucking in it. Barely, I don't know. Barely remember it. Didn't like it. Julie Darling with Sybil Danning came out that year. I'd never seen it. Let's see. Mausoleum. Somebody mentioned Mausoleum before. That's a solid movie for sure. Mortuary, I have not seen. I already mentioned that. Bill Paxton. Just trying to go down the list, make sure I mentioned as much as I could. Skullduggery is a piece of shit. That's a really bad Canadian horror movie. Really bad. Fuck. Something Wicked Comes This Way, directed by Jack Clayton, who I really like Jack Clayton as a filmmaker. I've never seen that. That's Diane Ladd, though. And Pam Grier. Fuck. I've got to see this, man. What the fuck? Dark fantasy horror. Wow. Look at this fucking movie right here. I don't know if anyone's seen Something Wicked Comes This Way, but please let me know. Is that worth it? Because that looks like a fucking banger. James Horner? What the fuck? I've never even heard of this movie. Spasms with Peter Fonda, Oliver Reed. I mean, I love both those actors. Canadian horror film. I've not seen that one. So Spasms is one I'll have to seep out. Pupi Avati's film Cedar, which came out in 1983. Of course, Pupi Avati, he made The House with the Laughing Windows, which me and Mateo talked about on a past episode where we did Three Jolly. Love Pupi Avati's work, and this is one that I'm actually not familiar with Cedar, but I really, really like the director, so that's one I would definitely have to seek out. I'm just going through the rest of the list here before we get into my number one. I want to make sure, like I said, I cover as much as I fucking can, because we've run through a lot of movies tonight, a lot of good, bad, and not much ugly. Just want to go through one more time. Bogey Creek 2 came out in this year. I'd never seen it. It gets a 2.4 on IMDb. No, thank you. Boogeyman 2, that's the worst. A 2.1 if you don't believe me. Please Don't Eat the Babies came out that year. That's one I've not seen. Let's just see. Scream Time already mentioned. Night to Dismember, never heard of it. Alchemist. Skullduggery, horrible fucking movie. All right. I think we've covered as much as 1983 as I could before we get to our number one pick, which to me is a slam dunk. To me is easily above and beyond the best horror movie that came out in this year, 1983. And in my opinion, I wish this was a movie that kind of could have transcended the genre into 1985 and onward, but it didn't really work out that way. This movie was a big bomb when it came out. To be specific, it grossed 2.1 million against a budget of around $6 million. So this was a huge bomb, unfortunately. And that's a shame because I think it's the best fucking movie that the guy ever did. And of course, I'm talking about David Cronenberg's Videodrome. Yes, Videodrome from 1983. A programmer at a TV station that specializes in adult entertainment searches for the producers of a dangerous and bizarre broadcast. Yes, Videodrome. Long live the new flesh, anyone? Amazing. Like I had to, I didn't want to grab, I have a ton of these movies. I was like, dude, I'm going to destroy my shelves if I start picking out all these. I wanted to make sure I did grab Videodrome though, because I love this movie. And in my opinion, it's Cronenberg's best. It's really, truly Cronenberg's best movie. It's such a shame that it bombed at the box office as hard as it did. A lot of Cronenberg movies didn't really do all that well at the box office. I know a lot of people will tell you The Fly is the best Cronenberg movie. I fucking disagree. It's this movie. Like he was really, and I know I was mentioning his filmography before, but I'd be remiss to fucking not mention it again. The Brood, the fucking Shivers, Rabid, Scanners, fucking all these great horror movies that he made moving into this one, where to me, I think it all came together for him. Now, a lot of people will tell you Cronenberg movies have pacing issues. And some of them do. The Brood has slow parts. Absolutely. Scanners could be a boring fucking movie at times. I'm not even going to deny that. But all those pacing issues are just erased here. This is an hour and 28-minute film, and it flies by. It is such a quick-paced movie. And I love everything about it. I love James Woods is the lead. Is this Max Wren, this television producer who's looking for something with a little bit of an edge, and he stumbles across the Videodrome, which it's sex and violence and torture, and that's where we're headed. You know, all that stuff, all the kind of commentary that's in this film, which I thought was brilliant from Cronenberg. Felt very Romero. Some of the commentary in this movie feels very George Romero, something Romero would have to say, is what Cronenberg says here. Debbie Harry, Blondie herself, soon found out had a heart of glass. I'm fucking one of the most beautiful women in the history of women. I love Blondie in this. You get to see Blondie's yitty. Let me tell you something, baby. Turn on the Videodrome. You're going to see Deborah Harry all night long, if you will. Deborah Harry's beautiful in this, burning herself with cigarettes, cutting her fucking arm. This really weird, kinky freak she plays, and she kind of becomes obsessed with the Videodrome, and she wants to audition for the Videodrome. It's really, really good stuff. I love her character in this movie. And all of the wonderful transitioning from technology and horror to body horror and merging the two together to make this fucking movie known as Videodrome. We had seen all the body horror, right? Rabid, classic body horror. Shivers, classic body horror. The Brood and Samantha Eggar, you know, some of the most disturbing body horror movies we've ever seen, and the head exploding in scanners. Here, it all comes to a pinnacle with James Woods interacting with the television, literally like trying to kiss the television. And some of the sequences where he gets the slit in his stomach and they insert it like it's a VHS tape, hence this awesome Criteria collection where it looks like a cassette and it is slit into the VCR, which is instead of just a slit in his stomach, which is really creepy to look at. Some of the virtual reality things, some of the dark red rooms, the style of this film, and the usage of the color red, especially. I mean, just this awesome blood red that just kind of paints this beautiful picture known as Videodrome. I mean, I love the usage of the red color in this movie. And James Woods, man, is awesome in this. I love James Woods. As, you know, like I was saying in Sky, he discovers it, and, you know, he looks deeper and deeper into the mystery, keeps finding out these interesting things, and, you know, how, you know, they're going to take over the world and all this stuff like that. I mean, I just adore this movie. I think it's so fucking good. You took the fucking words right out of my mouth before I was supposed to say it. The Howard Shore score, incredible stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I love Cronenberg from, you know, top to bottom. I mean, the guy has made so many of my favorite movies, but I never look past Videodrome as being my favorite. It's always been my favorite. I think it's just such a fucking great movie. Using the era to its advantage, you know, the 1980s, the colors to its advantage, the style, the sadomasochistic themes that would be played upon years later by Clive Barker. You know, I would like to think Clive Barker would be a big fan of this movie. I would think Clive Barker saw this and went, wow, that's what I want to write about. Because you read a lot of Clive Barker's work, man, the sadomasochism and all that stuff, and this, even the shit they're wearing in Hellraiser, you know, like all the outfits and shit like that, that I would think that was heavily fucking inspired by a Videodrome. I mean, some of the crazy scenes where he thinks he's whipping the TV, we film out here and we see a woman, this older woman, you know, tied up and gagged, and she's being whipped. Incredible, just incredible. And the whole sequence of when he shoots the guy and his whole head just fucking like bursts out and shit like that. And even when the guy chose to put the tape in, he pulls out and bomb explodes. His buddy at the station who turns heel on him. I couldn't gush about this movie, you know, any longer. I mean, I just absolutely adore Videodrome. Long live the new flesh. Special makeup effects by Rick Baker. You can't beat it. Videodrome is a fucking 10 out of 10 and my favorite horror movie in 1983. No ifs, ands, or fucking buts about it. Videodrome is the fucking best. Love this movie. Highly, highly recommend if you haven't seen it. But I see the comments were going a little bit wild. So let me get back into comments. I think we were here. Something Wicked Comes This Way. Okay, that one's I've not seen. Andrew Davis directed the Harrison Ford Fugitive movie. Okay, Something Wicked Comes This Way is a Disney film, and yes, it's a great fantasy horror. Okay, that's one I've never heard of. I have to check it out. Grande, and number one worst film of yours, Videodrome. No, definitely not Videodrome. Videodrome's number one best of this year. Videodrome is quintessential Cronenberg film. It is. It really. I know. A lot of people tell you The Fly, and I love The Fly too. I love Goldblum. I love Gina Davis. I love Dead Ringers. I love Jeremy Irons. That just doesn't beat this movie. Like, I think whatever. I know people always bitch about the pacing in his movies. There's no boring moment in this movie. This movie is so fucking fast paced. It's not to be believed. It's like all the pacing issues in any of his other films are fixed here. And it's so good. I actually would wish there was a longer cut of it. Like, I wish we could have more Videodrome in our lives. So good. Long live the new Flesh. Hell yeah, brother. I'd say Videodrome and Scanners are Cronenberg's best films. I can't rank one over the other. I would say Videodrome. It's probably, for me, it's Videodrome, The Brood, Dead Ringers, The Fly, and then Rabid. That's gonna be like my top 5 horror Cronenberg films. If we get into just Cronenberg after Cronenberg, forget it. We'll be here all fucking day with just all of his films. The King of Body Horror, big fan as well. I'm a Fly guy, LOL, but I got love for it. Yeah, no, totally. I think a majority of people tell you The Fly over this movie, and I love The Fly too. Don't get me wrong. The Fly is his most like mainstream horror movie that is just like this bomb. I mean, this was a fucking huge bomb, man. 2.1 against a budget of 6. That's a, oh my God. And then the Dead Zone comes out and like 10 months later, the same year, and is a big fucking monster hit. So, well, I don't know if it was that much. It was like 20 million against 10. So decent, but definitely for Stephen King, again, didn't make that much money. Neither did Christine. Isn't Max Rent a playoff of REM sleep when you're dreaming? I don't know. I vaguely remember Videodrome. I just mostly remember the effects were really wild, unlike anything I'd seen at the time. Yeah, no, it's body horror done perfect, in my opinion, man. Highly, like, mixing the technology and the censorship and James Woods and Blondie in there. Like, it's just such a fucking good movie. I watched Videodrome first time when I was very young. I find it disgusting. Watched it again as an adult, and I loved it. Hell yeah, man. The kid in you, horrified for the wrong reasons. The adult in you, loved it and embraced it. You gotta love it, man. Grande Videodrome sort of predicts what's happening right now with technology. Yeah, way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. I love it. He says, it's torture, it's sex, it's violence. There's no plot. And somebody goes, that's the future. And then some lady goes, if that's the future, God help us. I'm like, shit. Like, I would like to think that's a knock on the slasher films that were coming out at the time. Like, I totally think that's Cronenberg saying, yeah, they're doing their movies with all their fucking slashing and all this, the sleepaway camps and your burnings and your madmans and all that stuff, Friday 13th and Michael Myers and Halloween's and all that shit. I really think that's him taking a knock at that. Like, okay, like all sex, blood, and violence and no plot. All right, take my little jab. A harmless jab, a good jab to me. Videodrome, way ahead of its time. Completely agree. Grande, is Videodrome one of your all-time favorite? I don't know. All-time favorites is tough. It's of this year, it's the best movie that came out in 1983. There's no doubt about it. And it's my favorite Cronenberg, so definitely. All-time, I don't think it would make a top 20 list, but it would definitely be like a movie I'd recommend highly. I want to try out Videodrome. Grande. Really? Okay, I don't know about that. Debbie Harry from Blondie, top notch, dude, beautiful, and played the part perfectly. I mean, she loved horror. Like, she was in the Tales from the Dark Side movie as the fucking, the wraparound story, and she's in the classic Tales from the Dark Side episode, The Moth, which a lot of people don't remember, but The Moth is a great episode of Tales from the Dark Side, dealing with like witchcraft and stuff like that. And of course, always a big fan of Blondie as an artist. I just think the music Blondie put out was just fantastic. I like how the guy on the TV wasn't alive later when you find him in the film. That's right, Brian Oblivion. Yes, I love how he hangs himself on a TV screen, and there's tapes of that guy Brian Oblivion in the room. Grande playing off what Debbie Harry says in the movie. Okay, I got you. I want to try out for Videodrome. You think I'd make it? And you got to promise me to stay a hell away from that. It's real, and it just great stuff. Videodrome, you cannot fucking beat it. Love Videodrome. A 10 out of 10, the best of 1983. So we've been at this almost 2 hours talking all things 1983 and horror. I had a blast doing this. This was fun. If you guys like the show, I could definitely do more of these down the road. We could do different years. It doesn't necessarily have to be you're celebrating an anniversary, but I figured we give the fans their right to vote, and we did 2003 or 1983. 83 comes out on top, and man, I had a great time, man. A lot of good. I mean, you look at the state of horror 40 years ago, and you had some of the best fucking movies coming out at this time. That's why, like, people say, "Oh, the '80s is when it was booming." Yeah, it was. What was my negative reviews on here? Maybe 5 minutes, maybe. Like, so many quality movies came out this year. I mean, a lot of good as opposed to bad and goddamn ugly, man. A lot of good. But from top to bottom, I think it was a damn good year in horror. And then a lot of the 1980s years, you're going to see that, especially the early half. Like 80, 81, 85 are the best 3 years, but 83 would be right there. I would say 83 would be right behind those top three. It'd be 85, 81, 80, 83. Like those four would be my top four of the 1980s. Like those 4 years are just fucking incredible with what was coming out. And man, I don't know. Like at the time, if I was a young kid, I would be so excited to see what was coming next. Here now it's just different. It's just so different how 40 years later we look and there's really not much to run home about horror wise. It's kind of weird. But I don't know. I am a huge fan of 1983 and horror. It was a lot of fun talking and shooting the breeze with all of you guys. Alpha Romero's this fun show. Good stuff. Thank you so much, man, for checking out the show tonight. I appreciate that. Mateo throwing up one of these. A lot of surprise movies from 83. Great year. Awesome show. Grande. Cheers. Thank you so much, Mernsy. Mernsy will be joining us next week on the Graveyard for the Horror Roundtable Volume 5. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, where Mr. AJ Zetro, the bloody effing collector himself, Jake, and Mernsy Movie Matchin will make his debut on Grande's Graveyard next week for the Horror Roundtable Volume 5. You're not going to want to miss it. The following week, on Alpha Romero, you'll like this. We're doing a versus episode, Return of the Living Dead versus Day of the Dead, the battle of 1985 zombie movies, 10 categories, 0 regrets, ladies and gents. So I'm looking forward to that. Great fun show. Thank you so much. I appreciate you checking out the show, Russ. And Cooper Glover, he said it right here, right? Only on the Graveyard. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful, safe, happy, healthy 3-day weekend, everybody. Drink responsibly, drive responsibly, all that good shit. Stay beautiful, stay classic. Enjoy your horror movies. Check out some 83 horror movies over the weekend if you'd like to. And we'll be back next week with the Horror Roundtable numero 5. Yes, I'm looking very much forward to it. Everybody, love you guys. Thank you so much for the support. Too sweet, peace, and we'll catch you next time. Only, I did it again, on the Graveyard. Good night, everybody.